Hello everyone, and I hope you're doing well. Today we have the deck list that I brought to Euros. Now I will say this deck performed quite well, but the player not so much. I did go X3 with 2 wins under my belt, but the few games that I lost, they were my fault. I misplayed quite heavily. I think if I were to go to WCQ again, I need a lot more practice, but you'll hear more about that in the recap video. But this is a Runick build. I like to call Runick Jar or Junick. It basically centralizes around milling your opponent. Now, there is some floodgates in here, so you can call this stun as well. But we do feature some jars, which are my favorite cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! To resolve. And honestly, the looks on people's faces as soon as they saw a jar, whether they destroy it or I flipped it, was worth going for. And yeah, it's a really fun list to play. Maybe not to play against, but I thought I'd show it off as I took it. And I'll go through a couple of changes that I would have made after the event in retrospect. So let's get started with the main deck first. We have a couple of monsters here. So we have, to start off with, the singular copy of Cyberjar. This is limited to 1, so we can only run 1, unfortunately. But it destroys all monsters on field when it's flipped. Both players reveal the top 5 cards from their decks. Special summon all revealed level 4 or lower monsters in face-up attack or face-down defense, and then add any remaining cards to their hand. So this goes to both players. So if you flip it on your turn, you're going to pretty much draw 5 because we don't run that many monsters. And if you do hit a monster, it's another jar that you'll want to set face down anyway. And also, most importantly, if they have less than 5 cards in hand, they just do all that is left. So pretty much, if you're on the last couple of cards in the deck, you can flip this and guarantee the win. It's a really, really funny card. I think it worked really well. It did win me one of the 2 games that I won. But unfortunately, because it's limit 1, you don't see it as much. But there are a few ways we can get to it that we'll go into shortly. We have kind of the key of the deck. We have Morphing Jar 2. Now, Morphing Jar 2, really, really funny card. So, similar to Cyberjar, it doesn't destroy monsters, which is a good fact, but it shuffles all monsters into the deck on field, and then both players excavate until they hit the same number of monsters. If it's level 4 or lower, you summon it out in face-down defense position, and the rest goes to the graveyard. So this is a really good mill tool, not only for your opponent to get mills out of their deck, but to get runic cards into your graveyard. And with a spell card that we have, Sol and Luna, which we'll go over later, you can turn this pretty much into a quick play, same with Cyberjar. So it's a really, really funny piece of interaction. It does conflict with our floodgates a little bit, so you got to be careful with that. But yeah, it's so funny to resolve. And yeah, the look on people's faces as soon as they saw a Morphing Jar 2 was literally priceless. And last monster we have is just regular Morphing Jar, again limit 1. If you don't know, discard hand, draw 5. Both players do that. So this is a good win con when your opponent has no cards left in deck or less than 5. But alternatively, you can do it on your turn with Sol and Luna, draw another 5 into your runic stuff, and just keep popping off pretty much. So that's it for the monsters in the deck. These are all the monsters, just all jars. So in a traditional runic stun list, this would be like Imano Iwato, Inspector Border, but no, we want to have a little bit of fun with this deck list. And just on a side note, I love having these jars in the World Championship sleeves. It just hits different. So next we have the Runick core. I suppose there's not really too much to elaborate on this because we start with the 2 fountain, run max copies of that. I mean, obvious really, you need to see this as much as possible, and if one gets banished with Cosmic, you want to see the other one. And ideally, you could search the other one on the same turn, draw even more cards, and mill even more with your runic cards. Now, the free runic tip, again, another obvious one. Using this in draw phase to play around draw to grab fountain is a great way to do it. And there's a couple ways we can protect Hugin as well. A couple of flip effects like the Sol and Luna that can dodge imperm. But it's genuinely safer to go for tip in draw phase. Shout out to my boy Felstead. You know who you are, who helped me with a couple of tips with this deck. We also have 3 Runick Freezing Curses, the Monster Negate, and Banish top 3. Yeah, not much to say about this one. It's pretty much imperm with extra steps, and banishing cards from the top of the deck is the most important bit for this. So when you're getting low, when your opponent's getting low on cards, make sure you ask them for their deck size, how many cards are left, because you don't want to get into a situation where you can't play Runicks and they have a couple of cards left, and you need to really, in those last moments, make sure you play your Runick cards right. And next we have 3 Runick Destruction. Once again, this is the spell trap removal. It's I don't know, you could probably run this at 2. You're not worried about floodgates in this deck, other than maybe like power filter, which is kind of run at the moment. But mainly this is just here for either special summoning or getting those mills, because it does banish top 4, which is one of the best ones in this deck, other than the golden droplet. So that's the main reason we run it. It banishes top 4, and otherwise you're just using it to special and then draw off the fountain. We also have 3 flashing fire, similar to destruction. Honestly, I get these confused sometimes because of the art, which isn't great. It's not helping the allegations that I don't read cards. But this is the special summon pop, banish top 2. It's probably one of the best interruptions, other than freezing curses. So you can hold this one in your hand for your opponent's turn. We have 3 Runick Slumber. This is just probably one of the best ones to draw, because you can use it on your fusion summons or one of your opponent's monsters just to get the draws off a fountain. You can usually max out at 3 with this. And banishing top 3 is no joke either. So it's pretty much a must run at 3, especially in this build. Now we have the kind of one-offs. We have a Smiting Storm, pretty much using this to special summon almost 90% of the time, but the best thing about Smiting Storm is you can banish up to the number of cards your opponent controls, and you get to choose. So if your opponent has like 1 or 2 cards left in deck, you can choose 1 or 2 as long as they control that many. So it's a very versatile one. Sometimes you'll search it off tip if you're right at the end of the game and you don't have a jar set. The other one is Golden Droplet. Again, usually using this to special, but the other good thing about this is that you can use the draw, so your opponent draws 1, banishes top 4, at any point. So again, like Slumber, you can use it to draw off your fountain without having to kind of play with your extra monster zones. Runick Dispelling at 1 as well. Very rare that the add effect comes up, mainly because I'm running 1. We do have a card, 1 Day of Peace, that you can use this on, but in general, you're not really seeing it that often, and most of the time you're using it to special summon. But it's mainly there because it's another Runick name that can sometimes like help you activate your fountain. Now onto the kind of generic spells. We have 2 Sol and Luna. Now this is the card that changes your jars into pretty much quick effects. So you target 1 monster on either side of the field. If it's face up, you change it to face down defense position, and if it's face down defense position, you flip it to face up defense position. So on your opponent's turn, if you have a jar set, you can flip both and then use it as a quick effect then. Alternatively, if your opponent already has a monster on the field, you can use it on your turn. So you can use the original Morphing Jar to draw 5, Cyber Jar to draw 5, destroy everything. So it's a really versatile card, and in some niche cases you can play around Imperm with Yugioh, but usually if you're using Yugioh you're going first. But yes, it's mainly here for the jars, and it gives a lot of versatility to the deck. Honestly, it's one of the reasons the jars are actually work in this deck, because you can flip them whenever you want instead of waiting for your opponents to attack into them every time, which is one of the flip monsters' like biggest weaknesses. Because yeah, if they target it for pop, Sol and Luna, okay, I get my effect, it still dies, which is honestly ideal. You want your jars to die, specifically Morphing Jar 2, because you don't want to be milling that much if you're trying to mill out your opponent before you. So really, really versatile card. Honestly, really good. I know Mimigul is playing it at the moment, so I know the price is going up, so might want to pick those up. We have 2 Pop Duality. Now, this was an interesting kind of draw spell. I don't know if I'd keep running this. Main reason being I would usually want to special summon to maximize my draws off of the fountain. But in some cases it can be really good. But yeah, oftentimes I found myself discarding it just to maximize my draws off a fountain. But it is good. Like, if you need to see a floodgate, if you don't have any runics in hand, if you need to see a Sol and Luna, this is one of the best ones to have. So this one's iffy. So you can run this, but I'd be tempted to cut it. One I was very tempted to cut after the tournament is the Book of Eclipse. Now, flip everything face down. Your opponent draws equal to the number flipped up in the end phase, so all their monsters get flipped up. Obviously, the immediate synergy is that your opponent is drawing cards, which is, in a mill deck, that is a good thing, especially near the end of the game. And again, you can dodge Imperm with Hugin if you have this in your hand. Now, the trouble with this is if you have your floodgates up, like Rivalry, Tikbu, and you use this, it can enable their turn again if you flip this during their turn. It's not that big of a concern, but with it being like 2 cards, you can change these, I think. The other benefit is it flips your jars back down again, and your cards don't flip up, so you get to use a jar again. So I think that's the main reason I put them in. But the amount of times that situation came up, I don't know if it was worth the deck slots. But that's what we ran. It seemed to be okay against some decks. But yeah, it can turn off your floodgates, so just be careful with that. We have a Card of Demise, similar to Pot of Duality. You can't special summon. So this is very much, you have to see this in your opening hand to make use of it. Because you want to be very wary of special summoning, so you can actually draw 3 of this. And obviously this gets you into your floodgates and your jars quicker. So I think this is a must-have in the deck, to be honest. It was a last-minute addition, and I think it's necessary. Basically, these are a bunch of one-off spells. Now, we have Card Destruction in a mill deck. This is essential. Discard your whole hand, draw as many cards as you discarded. And it can be really funny. If you draw a rough hand, you can just play this, discard maybe a couple of runic spells as well, and then draw 5. Just be wary that sometimes your opponent has effects that want to go to the graveyard. So that's the only reason that's a downside. But in general, you need this for a mill strat. And it's funny, at one point I had about 15 cards in hand or something. I'll put the picture up on the screen. Not due to the card destruction, that would have decked myself out, but due to Cyberjar, Runic Fountain, and I think it was just card size limit as well. We have a Time-Tearing Morganite. We only run 1. We don't want to see more than 1. And we're drawing a lot of cards in the turn, so ideally we're going to see this either way. We were running 2, but yeah, you never want to see the second one, and you only really want to see this turn 1, so yeah, there's not much point in running multiple. We have Card Scanner, which is really interesting in Runic. I saw a few people using it, and it's really funny. So once per turn, you declare a card type, monster, spell, trap. Both players reveal the bottom card of the deck, and if it was the declared type, add it to their hand. So essentially, you always call spell after using Runic Fountain, because it stacks the bottom of your deck. So you can put the one you want back in your hand on the bottom, add it back. Jobs are good, and that's a free card. Now, the risk with this is your opponent might have a spell as well, but it's a risk you're willing to take, especially if you can hand pick the runic card you're adding back to hand. Now, the bonus effect is if this is destroyed or leaves the field. No, it's destroyed, not leaves. You can make your opponent place a card from their hand to the bottom of the deck. Now, unfortunately, they get to choose, so it's not as crazy as it sounds, but it's still pretty funny, especially if they like Lightning Storm you. Of course, you usually protect with Hugin, but sometimes that's not an option. Then we have One Day of Peace. Anti-Tempai tech. Not really, but it does help a lot. Each player draws a card, neither player takes damage to the end of your opponent's next turn. Again, mill condition. You can draw your last card in their deck and then kill them. But yeah, if you draw this turn 1 against Empire, you live an extra turn, and sometimes that's enough to snowball and get your jars on the field for them. Now, for the last spell in the deck, we have a very interesting one, and it might look a bit strange, but we have Instant Fusion. Now, let me just get the target out of the deck, because there is only one target that we run, and it's a very cool one. Master of Ham. Now, Master of Ham's effect is when it's fusion summoned or flip face up, you can special summon a flip monster from your hand or deck in face down defense position. So you can summon any jar you want onto the field, which is fantastic. Just a 1-card cyber jar, 1-card morphing jar, whatever you need. I mean, it's got a bonus effect. You can banish 2 flip monsters from face up on the field or in the graveyard. Special summon this in face down defense position, then banish it when it leaves the field. I don't think I used that effect once, but I did use Master of Ham a couple of times. But that's a bonus effect. So pretty much this is another copy of any jar in your deck. Just be careful not to play it in time, unless you plan to special summon the Munin to heal you up. And for the last bit of the deck, we have the Floodgates. Unfortunately, I was running no Floodgates previously, but a couple of the boys, Felstead and Wes, shout out, said this deck is too cute. And they were right. These Floodgates really helped the strategy, unfortunately. It might be cheesy to play, but they really did work. We have the usual. We have a Gozen, a Rivalry, and a Teakpoo. Of course, they're all limit 1, so we can only run 1, but we're drawing so many cards a turn that we're probably going to see them anyway. And they don't really affect us. We only have a couple of monsters, and if we have more than one, we're setting them face down anyway. So pretty much might as well run them. And when you're milling, you want to stop your opponent playing as much as possible. So this works really, really, really well. One last Floodgate to kind of fill out the list was a Synchro Zone. We only run 1 because we only want to see 1. That's pretty much my reasoning behind that. But also we don't have enough room. This is 41 cards at the moment. And with a couple of the cuts, we can maybe bring it to 39. But I still don't think I'd run a second Synchro Zone. I'd probably run a different Floodgate just so I can have a variety of Floodgates at the back row. But these honestly did me really well. I think at one point I had all 4 of these face up and it was just pass, 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 pass. Just keep activating Runick spells and you're just going to win that game state anyway. So let's move on to the extra deck. Now, we'll start off with, well, I mean, we already covered Master of Ham, so there he is, cool guy. We'll go for the kind of Runick stuff. We have 3 Yugioh, just to search your field spells. I mean, the protection effect is insane as well, so you can't not run 3, I believe. I mean, we kind of had extra space in the extra deck, to be honest. You'll see what we replaced it with soon, or filled the space with. We have 3 Jerry. This can be really good because it can't be destroyed by card effects, but also adds a Runick Fountain from the grave, which can be kind of clutch. You can pretty easily go into 2 Fountain once you get the Jerry up, because you can kind of use the other fountains, send the other one to the graveyard, summon Jerry, get the other one back, and you can start this little bit of a loop if you can get Jerry off the field. So pretty cool card. I think you do run 3. We have 2 Munin. This is your time card. Well, one of them gained 1,000 during the end phases. We don't run Allure. It just didn't seem worth it. Even in the mill strat, I think we have enough milling cards that we don't need Allure. But I think you could run it. You could make the argument that you could run it over like a Book of Eclipse or something. But would you want to discard a card for it? I don't think so. So it's mainly just there for time. 2 just in case they manage to remove one or negate it or something. We have 1 Sleipnir. I like to call him Slipknot. He is good. He summons tokens and bounces stuff. I didn't really utilize it well enough. I hadn't had enough practice with Slipknot versus just summoning Yugioh. But I think he has a lot of potential. You could potentially run him at 2 instead of one of the cards I'm about to show. I didn't want to buy another one because I still didn't really have that much experience with him. So I think you can run 2 of this. We have 1 Frecky as well. I rarely went into this one. It plays really bad into Yubel and plays quite bad into Tempai as well. because they can't kill it with 2000, so they can keep swinging into it, and they're not taking damage of this anyway, so it's quite rough. I mean, it does banish the top two, and when it dies, you can add a kind of Runick quick play from the grave, but at that point, you've already got the quick plays you need, and if you don't, you're probably going for something that can wall up a bit better than this. But sometimes it's useful. 2000 attack is nothing to kind of scoff at against some decks. Now we have the slots that are a little bit questionable. We have Zeus. Don't know why he's in here, to be honest. I pretty much never go into the battle phase, so this would probably be your Slipknot. I have no cards that steal. Literally just there in the very fringe case that I want to go into him off of Typhon. Typhon came up a lot more often, as you can imagine. You can just summon a Runick guy and then go into Typhon if it's good against your opponent. But the Zeus, I don't know why he's there. He really should be another Runick card, probably another Slipknot or another Freki. So that's it for our XCs. Now we have one that could come up, Lingaribo. If there's a few sprites going around at the moment, and if you run into Ibli, you're a bit fucked. So having Lingaribo is nice to just link that off. That's pretty much the only reason this is in. You could probably make the argument that you're on two of these, replace a Zeus, just in case they have another one, if you really are that concerned about Ibli. But I think usually one is enough. And for the last card in the extra deck, we do have SP Little Knight. You can pretty much use this and one of your jars to go into this and banish a card. It doesn't come up often, but it comes up often enough that it is worth the slot. Now, if you don't have SP Little Knight, you can genuinely play without it. I'd be tempted to say run another Lingaribo, I mean, even a Link 2 isn't that necessary. Maybe Donna to get round, say, Baguska. Donna Kebab, but yeah, SP is like such a good card, and especially because you're summoning fusions for free, it's generally worth it. And of course, if you use the banish effect to banish this and another monster, you bring them back in the end phase, but you can put this in the not extra monster zone, so you can keep going with your Runick stuff. There was a point where I thought maybe I should run Nightmare Unicorn because it's a Link 3 in the rare case that SP Little Knight banishes and then comes back and then I can link it off. I think you can make that argument as well. I'm not 100% certain with it because I haven't tested much with it. And of course the situation doesn't come up often. So honestly, extra deck is your oyster there, other than obviously the Runick stuff. We have next the side deck. Now with the Runick Stun and Runick Jar, you are strong going first. You need to be siding for going second because that is where the weakness is. So we have kind of some obvious going second cards. We have two Lightning Storm and one Harpy's Feather Duster. Obviously start with these. It's really, really good against the meta at the moment. Might be tempted to run Raigeki as well, but we have a couple of other outs to nasty boards that I'm about to show you, because we have a couple of the kind of tribute guys. We have 3 Lava Golems and 3 kind of sphere modes. So these honestly came in clutch. Just simplifies the game state, and that's exactly what you need. If you somehow get the sphere mode back and they don't link it off, you have an unattackable monster, which is really funny. But these are so good just against most decks. If there's something 3, go for the sphere mode. If there's something 2, go for Lava Golem. If they're doing either, go for both. Just side them all in and kind of ruin their day. Next, we have a couple of time cards because we're going to time pretty much every game unless you really brick against, say, like Tenpai. We have 2 Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. This card is insane. Of course, you have to make sure you don't activate Morganite. You might even want to sign Morganite out if you're adding this in. But this helps you win in time. That's pretty much the only reason this is in. Of course, we have the extra deck guy. That gets you 1,000, but that's sometimes not enough. So this is what that's there for. Now we have 4 cards left in the side, and these are the questionable ones that I almost definitely would change. We have 2 Dimensional Fissure. I'd be tempted to run this in the main, maybe 1 copy in the main instead of in the side, because these are going first cards, and as I said, I don't think I found a situation where I wanted to side these in, or if I did, they didn't make much of an impact. So I would be tempted to side these out, change them for more going second cards. Maybe the new Molt Chummy could go here instead. On a similar line, we have two, like, it's a very jank card, this card. It's Sonic Jammer. Now, it's also a flip monster. So the effect is flip. Your opponent cannot activate any spell cards until the end phase of your next turn. Now, the problem with this is you need to flip it with Soul and Luna. And by that point, your opponent needs to have a monster on the field. And if they have any power spells like Lightning Storm, Harpies, etc., they're going to activate it before they summon a monster or flip the Sonic Jammer. So I think that this could go. You don't need this. Just ignore him. He's not here. This maybe, but the Sonic Jammer, get rid of that. Maybe put the new Molt Chummy in. Maybe just put a third copy of Ghost Sister in. As funny as the Sonic Jammer was, as I sided into him many times, but I would much rather see a jar than one of these. Thank you for watching. This was my deck list, and as I say, it's not perfect. I think there is a couple of changes, as I mentioned, that could have helped me go further. I honestly think practice was key, and I didn't practice enough for the event, but this deck genuinely feels really solid, and I wouldn't be surprised if they hit Runick on the next list, at least a tiny bit, since Runick was topping a bit. But there will be a balanced prediction soon, so don't you worry. But anyway, that being said, if you made it this far in the video, please do feel free to hit subscribe. New Yu-Gi-Oh videos each week. And as always, happy drawing.